Welcome to FireDAC Skill Sprint. This is PawelGlowacki from Embarcadero. I'm working as EMEA Technical Lead for Developer Tools, and today we are going to focus on a very interesting FireDAC execution technique called Array DML. This skill sprint is based on Delphi XE7, but I could have also used C++ Builder. I'm going to use FireMonkey for creating multi-device applications, but these techniques that I'm going to demonstrate also works with the VCL. I could also use app method, which provides the same capability for building multi-device applications using FireDAC. Applications created with Delphi and with FireDAC can run and be natively compiled for Windows, Mac OS X, Android and iOS. Skill sprints are very short, so it's maximum 20 minutes time that we are going to spend on focusing on just one topic, and this topic today is Array DML. What is Array DML? Array DML is a technique to submit in a single database command an array of parameters, and then this array of parameters are executed one by one by the database. In this way we have much better performance, because instead of sending through the network each command as a separate entity, we can send the whole array of parameters, and then we ask the database to execute a command for each row. You can visualize it in this way, that we have a certain command, for example insert command, and we want to insert into a certain table a number of parameters. So we need to execute this insert statement multiple times. But with Array DML we can take all parameters that we want to send to the database and send them in one operation, and then ask the database to insert all those records. So this makes it for much better performance. So yeah, let's have a look and let's compare what is the difference between a standard insert statement and how we can speed up execution with an Array DML. Okay, I'm going to jump into Delphi XE7, and first I'm going to create a new multi-device application for Delphi. I'm going to go for a blank application. I'm going to save it in some convenient location. For example, this could be a test array DML folder. Click on save, give this a nice name for the project, test array DML. Okay, so this is our demo application that we are going to use to compare traditional insert statements and insert statements with Array DML technique. So we need to have a certain database table that we are going to use to insert those records. I'm going to use Interbase, and with standard installation of RadStudio XE7 you get an employee database. So I'm going to use this database to create a new database table. So the easiest way to get started is just to drag this employee node onto the form to create an FireDAC connection component that is already pre-configured to point to this database. If I double click this component, I can see here there is a test to make sure that we can successfully connect to this database. And there is also a very handy window here, SQL script, when I can type in some statements. For example, I can use this window to create a new test table that will contain just two fields. There will be a field 1 and field 2. The first field will be integer field, and the second field will be a string field with a for maximum of 20 characters. I can execute this statement, so it looks like the statement was okay. Click on OK, and I can verify that this was actually created inside of a database. I can click on refresh on a table node, and here we have our test table created with just two fields, field 1 and field 2. We are going to use this test table to perform test insert statements. Okay, so let's we need to also have a query component. So I'm going to add a TF the query component to the mix. So this query component, I can double click and provide an insert statement. So insert into my test field 1 and field 2. This is not case sensitive values, and two parameters, field 1 and field 2. Okay, I can specify here what are the types of the parameters. So the field 1 is an input parameter and it's an integer value, and field 2 is an also input parameter and this is a string value. Okay, click on OK. So we have a query that we are going to use to execute these insert statements. I'm going to add a button component, T button component to the form. So I'm going to use this button component to do my insert statement. So first we are going to do a standard insert statements. So I'm going to I need maybe change the text property of this button that I know what it is. So that will be a standard insert or insert standard. So I know that is my insert standard, and yeah, we need to specify how many inserts we want. So I'm going to define a constant called number of inserts and make it, for example, 10,000, so we can see the difference. Okay, so we need to have a variable, for example, y integer, and we can just define for e0 2 number of inserts minus 1 and begin end. So here we need to provide values for our parameters. So in the loop, this is a traditional way of executing statements in the loop. So we need to provide values for our parameters. So there is a first parameter is field 1, and I know it is an integer value. I'm going to provide some dummy value, and the second parameter is a string parameter. Its name is 2 as string, and let's put some string here, for example like this, and we can just execute our query using an execute SQL. Okay, that's perfect, but the whole point here is to actually find out how much time it takes. So we need to do something about it. So I'm going to use a stopwatch. So in the system.diagnostics namespace, there is something called stopwatch. So I'm going to add my stopwatch to the form, stopwatch. So before I do my loop, I need to start this stopwatch. So this is a start new, and after my loop is finished, I can just call it stopwatch stop. Okay, and now I can display in a text of the button, so I know the sender is my button, how much time it took. So I have my stopwatch has a property elapsed milliseconds, and I'm going to convert this to string and add milliseconds at the end. So now it looks okay. We don't need to worry about a stopwatch. If you jump into the stopwatch definition, you can see that this is a record, so we don't need to release or do anything related to this variable stopwatch, because it's not a class, it's a record, so we don't leak any memory. Okay, let's run this. I think it's a good idea before we run this, we need to also add to this form this GUI wait cursor, TF, the GUI wait cursor, because otherwise this application will not run. Okay, so let's run and see what kind of a performance we are going to get. And it takes time, quite some time. So 10,000 records to be inserted in just a regular loop. Let's see how much time it will take. We should see the number of milliseconds. It's almost 20 seconds it took to insert that many records. So this is very, very slow. And the one thing that we are doing wrong here is we forgot about transactions. So if we wrap this this loop into the SQL transaction, we should get a much better processing time. So we have our employee connection component. We can use this to start transaction. It's a good practice to actually enclose it into the try finally block. So whatever happened, this transaction will be committed. So now I can call employee connection commit. And also one more thing, every time I'm clicking on a button, I'm adding 10,000 records to the table. So I think it would be a good idea to have better results to actually make sure that this table is always empty. So before every execution, we are going to execute this SQL delete from test. So in this way we know that every time we are starting from scratch. So let's see what kind of a performance we are getting right now. So it is 10 times faster, so it's less than 2 seconds. Every time we click on this button, that it will be slightly different, but we see that to insert 10,000 records into our Interbase database takes slightly less than the 2 seconds. How we can improve this performance? So let's use Array DML. I'm going to copy this button on the form, make it an insert Array DML as on the text Array DML, so we know what it is. Okay, and now we need to create a new on-click event handler, and we are going to copy most of the code from this first event handler to the second one, and we are going to do some slight modifications. So first of all, we don't want to execute this query 10,000 times. The whole thing about the Array DML is to instruct the database to execute all the parameters. So we need to first of all specify how many parameters we are going to provide. So we need, inside of my query, I have a params property, and it has a array size, and here I can specify, okay, expect from me that I'm going to provide you with 10,000 parameters. So my query is prepared. And now inside of the body of the loop, we are going to change it. So instead of assigning to every parameter, there is also an alternative way. You can also assign as integers and not just as integer. So here we are using this second functionality. So here we specify that we are going to do as integers and same as strings. So in this way we are providing values for like a two-dimensional array of parameters. So in one dimension we have just our two parameters, field 1, which is an integer, and field 2, and in a second dimension we have a 10,000 elements. So this is how we initialize it. So now instead of executing SQL, and this will execute my SQL only once, we need to use a different method. Instead of calling exec SQL, we are going to do execute, and this method takes as a parameter a number of times that we want to execute this batch of parameters. So we are initializing our parameters in the query to certain values, and then we can tell, okay, I want to execute this 10,000 times. Okay. We can also specify in a second parameter an offset. So for example, I could execute this 10,000 parameters 5 times, 2,000 parameters each time. But let's keep it simple. I'm just providing this number of inserts. So these changes should do. Let's see what kind of performance we are going to get. So our standard insert takes about 2 seconds, and our Array DML insert is almost 10 times faster. So from the very primitive insert statement in the loop without transaction processing, we have got 10 times faster times with just adding transaction processing, and using Array DML our results were 100 times faster, so just 10 times faster than regular insert statements. So that was a very short introduction to the Array DML. So Array DML can be used to speed up execution of your statement. So if you have if you need to send a number of records to the database, you have a parameterized query, you can use Array DML to get much better performance. Okay, so that's it for today's FireDAC skill sprint. Next week there will be cascading option system. So thank you very much, and I'm now happy to join the live Q&A. Thank you very much.
Alf asked you, can Array DML be used for updates of a row in a table? Or yes, go ahead. Sorry, in a row in a table.
Yes, it can be used for different kinds of statements. The insert was just used as an example, but basically, if you want to send multiple, if you want to do the same operation with a number of parameters, you can use Array DML. So this could be used also for example, using update statement, or you can use this also passing parameters to stored procedures and so on. So yes, this is more than just insert statements. It's for other types of operations as well.
And everyone, if you wanted to see more, just search for FireDAC Array DML in the Q&A log. Okay, Alf is asking, is there any benefit to change this method if there is only one record to insert, but maybe there will be many tables to be inserted to one record in each table?
I think this is more related to the last reference in this references table here. So basically, you have also a possibility to group commands and send them in one batch to the database. So this is not strictly Array DML, but somehow is related to it. So you can, for example, send two select statements in just one operation, and then you can get two data sets. So I think this is more what Alf is looking for is probably more related to these command batches. And yeah, basically the Array DML is useful when you want to execute more than one time the same operation, so the same command, but possibly with different parameter values.
And I put the link to both Array DML in the Q&A log as well as the command batches URL from the DocWiki. Yen says, hey, cool, you can do exec SQL right on the connection. He learned something new today. Well, that's part of the skill sprints, right?
Exactly. So you can also very quickly use the attack connection and pre-configure it by dragging from a data explorer. So that was there for ages for the VCL, and relatively recently added also for the FireMonkey. So that's also very useful.
And David was saying wondering if you're going to demonstrate update, but you already had the discussion that you can use any SQL operation that involves parameters, right?
Yeah, correct.
And so whether it's an update, a delete that has parameters with where clauses, selects, and where clauses, all of that is possible. Great sprint. Is array DML, is it a zero-based array? I think it looks zero-based.
Yeah, it is. Basically, it's you have this array size. Yeah, you specify array size, but you iterate through it. Actually, we don't really iterate ourselves. It is the database that iterates through the array that we pass. So it is just an array, but you can start from 1 if you like, or you can start from 0. It's up to you.
Yeah, people really like you showing the incremental improvements in performance. No transaction array DML. That's just absolutely great to see and show everybody. Let's see. Peter says, I regularly push 3,000 updates over to a server via internet. Is this performance limited to local TCP IP, or will you have the same acceleration performance?
Yeah, I think this
partially, right? I mean, there's still going to be overhead.
Exactly. Actually, the thing is that you will benefit with in all scenarios, because it's if the communication is your bottleneck, then you are going to benefit more, because you are not going to send these instructions over the internet many times, but you just group them in just one operation and send them all together. And then on the other side, it is the database that executes this array DML. And I think that's also something that is worth mentioning, that also this is in this array DML help topic, that there are different databases. Some of the databases supports array DML natively, but some of them don't do it, and then the FireDAC emulates the array DML functionality. So this is one of the key objectives of FireDAC architecture, is to provide the same functionality for all databases. So it doesn't matter if the certain database support array DML or not. From the perspective of the application, all databases support this mechanism.
Yeah, and again, in that FireDAC URL that I put in, there's a table just below the general overview of databases and which ones have native array DML implementation and which ones FireDAC will use emulation under the covers. And that you're right, Pawel. The great thing is you don't have to think about which database has or doesn't have native support for array DML. You get the same functionality on all databases at the programming level.
Yeah, correct.
Okay. So again, everyone can take a look at that, and it's down after the first diagram and first couple paragraphs. You'll see for all the databases that are supported. For example, I think Interbase if it's earlier than exe3 Interbase, it says it's emulation, but exe3 and above, exe3, exe7, there's native support. Firebird, less than 2.1, it's emulation. Greater than or equal to version 2.1, it's native, and it's using execute block under the covers. Microsoft SQL Server native, Oracle native, via OCI array DML API. So you can all take, this is capable of FireDAC or the RDMS to support array DML. Again, go ahead, Pawel. It's either FireDAC will emulate it or it has native support.
Yes, exactly. Maybe it's a good idea to put on the screen this array DML help topic, so that's I think more visual. So again, this is what we already said. So some of the databases support this natively. For the ones that do not support it natively, FireDAC emulates it from the perspective of the application that is using FireDAC, all databases support array DML. There are also some performance comparisons also in these topics. This is I really like FireDAC. It's so nicely documented, and so you can just find it in the documentation, all information that you need.
And Alf is asking about Oracle, and the answer is yes. and you see it on the screen right now. That's and also that just go to that URL. For any questions about specific database and what's emulated native, just go to the URL that I've given you, and you can look on the screen. So if you got your browser open, Pat's asking, let's see, okay, MySQL, it's native, yes. So Peter, yes. Pat is asking, how does this queuing method, I'm not sure the term queuing, work with multiple user databases, keeping data clean, who changed data last, and is there error returns for record and field conflicts? There is a discussion down here about, on the page, there's a link, there's a discussion of what do you do about troubleshooting and error handling. There's an error handling section. So again, go to this document and you'll see things like error handling. Michael's asking, are the array DML parameter loading functions limited to string as integer, or are there other kinds? We have all sorts of helper field and helper functions. As float, sure. As date timestamp, I mean, you can look at the as list or the dot, to string, to bool, to boolean, to float, and so on. So the answer is yes. There are many as ... for
as floats, as FMTBCDs, as fixed charts, and you can find for yourself.
Yep. So there's basically for every database column type that we support through FireDAC, there's an as function. As again, SQL date timestamp BC. There may be SBCD. I'm not sure. Sometimes you use an equivalent one, and there's information online for all of that. Is there a limitation to array DML size?
That's a good question. I think there always a limitation in terms of memory. I think in this help topic you can see that if you don't specify the size, there is some default value, but I don't exactly know about the actual limits. I would say that the RAM is the limit, probably. But I don't think that the architecture of the FireDAC just imposes certain hard-coded limit. I think one more comment. I'm going to put the source code of this presentation on community.embarcadero.com, so you will be able to have a look for yourself. So I hope to maybe put it in the tutorial section, so we can really have one place for the source code from different FireDAC Q1 2015 skill sprints, just for a future reference.
Bjorn's saying, remember one thing when using blobs, don't use as blobs for fields, use good old streams, load from streams. Yep.
Yeah, correct.
And then Jens saying Oracle has a limit of 65K. Thanks for that. So again, I put a note in there to check with your database provider documentation for any other limits of some kind. So, and Pawel will. Are you going to blog to tell people about the link on your Embarcadero blog? Once you
I want to put like a kind of a page that we can use as a place to put the source code from all those sprints. So we are now at the sprint number 4, so we should be able to collect those 4 demos from 4 weeks so far and incrementally add, so everybody know where to find it in case they need it.
Pawel, do you know if Array DML has been around for a long time? And I know it's it's been around since we converted the name AnyDAC to FireDAC and made it part, but I'm not sure how far back Array.
Yes, this is a feature that was even before FireDAC, so it was part of the AnyDAC. So yeah, it's not a new XC7 feature. It's a feature that has been in this technology for quite some time. I'm not exactly sure at which moment in the past AnyDAC got this array DML support, but as long as it is part of Delphi and C++ Builder, the array DML was always here.
Yeah, there's something. Jens was saying. I put the link for XZ6. There's something changed in the in the doc wikis, because when I put, I guess some pages were changed, but that's all right. Here you go. There's exe7 link. Okay. But I've noticed there's a few pages that got converted or changed somehow, but in general, if I put up a link exe6 for anything, whether it's Delphi, Red Studio, FireDAC, or whatever, just change the 6 to a 7, and you'll get the same. It's the same underlying page. Maybe it was something was added between 6 and 7, but yeah, okay. Excellent. Lots of good comments about the skill sprint. Okay, there's one here I'm going to have to. I'll take offline. I'm not sure specifically. Grigor is saying FireDAC General on Android sometimes the open table append insert post does not work. It's a conversion error. Send me an email, Grigor, because I need to look and see why you're getting some kind of conversion error. Otherwise, all these operations on tables and queries should work just fine. So conversion error could be a typing, some kind of typing issue in your code or in your parameters you're passing to a SQL statement or something, depending on the code. So send me an email on that one. And then there's the see also link. So here's I already gave you the command batches link. Here's the I'll put in one of the Q&A logs, the performance of Array DML command. There's some discussion about performance and usage. So again, you can take a look at all of the great FireDAC DocWiki documentation for Jens is saying, Grigor, on Android mobile, you can get conversion error if you lost the connection, move from one cell to another, also on iOS. So you might check if you're, Grigor, if you're getting, you're being disconnected or reconnected from the database. And you can check to see, you can have an on, there's either take advantage of the exception and check the network status. You can do on, there's some before close and before connect. I forget the event on FD connection, but you can take a look at the event handlers for FD connection and hook one of those if you're losing a connection. Okay, everyone. What happens if connection breaks while transferring the array? Good question. How about an exception? And you need error handling? Yeah.
I'm not sure about this one, but we don't have a specific topic about it. But nice thing about FireDAC is that you can if your connection is lost, it can be reconnected without restarting the application. There is a special events on the connection component that lets you decide what you want to do when the connection is lost and then regained. So, but still, yeah, it's difficult to say what will happen if the connection breaks in the middle of the transfer. Probably that the transfer won't be successful.
And it's also a good thing then to always use a transaction. If you think you're going to be in that world, do a transaction. That way, if you get disconnected and you're in the middle of something, you can do a rollback and then start the transaction again, run the array DML, and do the commit. Okay?
Exactly.
Use transaction, start, commit, roll back. That's just standard good practice in doing transactions and doing things like batch operations and long-running updates and so on. And also it gives you good performance. Of course, then other things can happen if you start transactions. And
yeah, the thing with this, with the demo that I showed, when we don't do a transaction, then the transactions are created automatically. So then you have a transaction started and committed for every insert operation. So that's why it took so long. So it's a good practice to do it explicitly if you want to get a better performance. Okay, I don't see any more questions in the log. So if anybody wants to have more, we'll just have more sessions.
Yeah, there's just one more here that popped up, and we'll take this last one because we're past the normal skill sprint time. Maurizio is saying, what if one of the parameters does not need to be an array? For example, when all records to insert have all the same foreign keys or something.
Yeah, you don't have to have all the values for parameter. The values for your query does not have to be completely parameterized, if you like. So, or you can specify the same value many times.
Robert Love is asking, does this work with all databases? If not, does it support Oracle?
Yes, it does. Actually, on the help doc URL that you can see on the screen, there is a list of databases, and some of the databases are supporting Array DML natively, and some of the databases that are supported by FireDAC does not have the idea of Array DML, but for these databases, FireDAC emulates the Array DML in code. So from the perspective of the application that you write, all databases are supporting Array DML. So you can use this technique for all databases that are supported by FireDAC.
And I put the link to the Glowacki document in the Q&A log, Robert. On that page, just below the general overview of Array DML, there is a list of the databases that are supported by FireDAC. And if you look at Oracle server, it's native via the OCI Array DML. Somebody else asked about Postgres, and Postgres, if it's less than version 8.1, it's emulation. If it's Postgres greater than or equal to 8.1, it's native. And again, you'll see on that page, if you all go there, that you'll see for all the databases that are supported in FireDAC, which ones use emulation under the covers and which ones use native interfaces that are there. So for interface greater than or equal XE3 is native using a command batch API. Firebird greater than or equal 2.1 native using execute block. So everyone can look at all of those databases in that table to see whether it's emulation or native, which doesn't matter because Pawel, it's the same code, right? You just use FireDAC and the components, and you get the effect without having to write any special code that's specific to each database, right?
Yes, that's exactly the truth. Actually, one of the key objectives of our architecture of FireDAC is to be able to create applications that are compiled once and work in the same way with all different databases. So different databases are different. So some of them support Array DML natively, some of them do not. But from the perspective of the application developer, it doesn't matter because for those database platforms that do not support Array DML, FireDAC emulates this functionality. So you can use Array DML functionality for all databases.
And can you use Array DML with TFD table?
No, I'm not sure how you could possibly use it. It's more about sending a number of commands to different, like you can use parameterized commands like insert statements, you can use update statements, delete statements, but a table component has a, you don't send to a table component a lot of commands. So it's, I don't think that the question is actually could be easily answered in this way.
And Thomas is just saying, excellent presentation. Now he's got some important optimization to in the database communication. And yes, that's one of the key points of skill sprints, that you learn something real direct that you can use immediately, which is what I love about them as well. And Thomas was asking about inserts only. You can use Array DML for any parameterized SQL statement, whether it's an update, delete, query, select, right?
Yes, exactly. So this is like a high-level functionality. So it also works not only with a query component, but also with a stored procedure component. So anytime that you have a situation that you want to send, like execute against a database, a number of commands that are parameterized, you can use array DML to just send all these array of parameters or records of parameters to the database platform in just one operation, and then you get a better performance because you don't have to send every single statement in like a separate operation.
I also put the link, Thomas, to command batches. There's also a way that you can do, well, there's batch operations, but you can check out command batches as well. I think it was Richard was asking that it's fantastic for doing multiple inserts with a batch of records, but I wouldn't use this for a small set of record inserts, would you? I don't think there's any distinction, really.
No, I don't think so either.
You can use array DML regardless of the number.
Yeah, we had on a previous session we have a number of, we have questions about the size of the buffer. There are some defaults for the if database like Oracle, for example, supports this natively. There are some predefined limits on the size of the buffer that you can use to send all those parameters, but at the end it's a good idea if you want to have a better performance when you have a repetitive operations against a database, and then there is the same SQL but only the parameter differs. It's always a good idea to use array DML.
Yeah, someone mentioned earlier today that for Oracle, for example, it's 65,000.
I think it was Jens. It was Jens. We had Jens presenting last week.
And let's go ahead. And also, but somebody posted the answer in the morning that it was for Oracle was 65,000 characters or bytes was the maximum for doing an array DML type thing. And somebody else was asking earlier, what if one parameter doesn't change, and so you would just do the changing parameter, and the second parameter, if in your for loop example, you just always put the same value, right?
Yes, exactly. Like in the case of the foreign key, when you want to insert a number of values. Actually, in the help Glowacki, when you want to actually have a good performance inserting a lot of records in the table, it's always a good practice to drop a primary key, because in many situations the database would incur an additional overhead with just inserting records. So if you have like 10,000 records, we probably should drop the primary key before the operation, and then after all the records are in place, then rebuild the primary key, so rebuild the index. So that's another thing that is mentioned in the Glowacki. And also coming back to this command batches, we don't have a separate skill sprint this time for FireDAC for command batches, but this is a very similar technique as array DML. So you can send more than one SQL command to the database and get the results in one operation. So for example, with command batches, you can have like 2 select statements to retrieve records from 2 different database tables, and then you receive from a database in just one operation the result sets from two different queries. So that's a similar technique, but that you see the URL to Glowacki to find out more.
Hugo's asking about memory usage. These are dynamic arrays, aren't they? Will they shrink if you change the number of items?
It's not really clear, because this is a FireDAC that manages the memory. So you call certain functionality like set the array size of parameters for the FireDAC, but I don't know. It's not something that the developer would actually be able to control. But I'm sure that Dimitri, the architect of FireDAC, did a great work to make sure that there is an optimal scenario here. So so basically, I would say the more parameters you want to allocate, the more memory you're going to use, and that's it.
And I'm suggesting to Scott and Hugo, go and ask on the FireDAC forums, FireDAC news groups, and Dimitri is there a lot, and he will answer. And oftentimes the questions and answers that are there show up in the Glowacki, in the FAQ, as well as show up in the documentation somewhere along the way. So,
I would say
go ahead.
That community.embarcadero.com is a great place to ask all kinds of questions. So this is really a to-go place for people asking questions and having doubts and not knowing how to do things. So http://community.embarcadero.com is the place to go for answers.
Go to the answers area, post a question, and he's there, we're there. But there's a lot of information in the Glowacki. Also, I encourage everyone to watch Dimitri's talk at Code Rage 9 on what's new, tips and tricks, and things he's working on for the future. Go in and watch that replay. So go to the Code Rage 9 page in either track, and you'll see Dimitri's talk. And he also encourages during the Q&A, as people were asking him questions, to post things in the forums, and he's there answering questions. He loves doing that. So, but the documentation is really clear. People are asking about source code. Pawel's going to do a blog post, and in the Glowacki there is there's source code, Object Pascal source code. For example, on the Array DML page, people were asking about the query, and Pawel just wrapped it with a button click and then did the stopwatch things, but you'll see the same kind of code with the for loop right on that Array DML FireDAC Glowacki page for setting the parameters and looping through. He's got a hard-coded number 0 to 100 - 1. That's pretty interesting. 100 - 1. Okay.